Divya, Rahul, we just started with the EC2 section part, right? So we were able to launch the first machine, isn't it? Yeah. So let's get continued with the same part in here. So in overall, I'll just pick up this part here. So we learned about what is the introduction of EC2, and then we learned how to launch an EC2 instance. In the introduction specifically, we learned what are the different types of instances, on-demand, spot instances, and the reserved. And we learned about the families of EC2 instance as well. That is DIRT, MCG, FPX. Right. So we have different kinds of system based upon the usage. So in case you wish to use a heavily CPU based machine, you can go for C machines, and if you want heavily memory based machines, you can go for R based machines, and so on. And we learned in detail about what is EBS, that is elastic block store. What are the different types? Specifically, it has two types, that is SSD as well as the magnetic. In SSD we have GP2 and IO1, and in magnetic we have ST1, that is throughput optimized, SC1, that is cold hard disk drive, and then the magnetic standard. And then we learned how to launch an instance. So launching an instance is as same as remembering the 6 important components of any computer, that is CPU, RAM, hard disk, network access card, security, and the operating system. So if you remember, when we are going to launch an EC2 instance, the very first step that we have to proceed through is with selecting an operating system, that is Amazon machine image. And then in the second step, we are basically going to select the family of a EC2 instance, which comprises of the CPU capacity and the RAM capacity. In the third step, we are specifically working out on the network part, where we are selecting which VPC my instance is going to be a part of, what is the IP address that is going to be assigned to my instance, and how many instances I would like to launch with the same configuration. And in case if I want to attach any roles or put down any bootstrap script, I'll be able to put in the step number 3. And in the step number 4, we are specifically selecting the size of the EBS volume, that is hard disk that gets attached to the instance. Now I'm not opened up any PPT yet. I'm just reviewing back. And in the 5th step, we are specifically putting up the tags. And in the 6th step, we are selecting the security group. And finally, after reviewing all the things, we are going to launch an EC2 instance. So when we are launching an EC2 instance, if you remember, we have to attach something called as key pair. Now, usually, if you want to log in into any machine, whether it's a Linux or Windows based in the cloud or anywhere else, you basically require either of these. One is user ID and the password, or the user ID and the key pair. The cloud companies usually follow this methodology, that is user ID and the key pair. So we usually launch our virtual machines with the help of key pair. Now, key pair is a combination of public key and the private key. Right? So the public key will be stored on the server and the private key will be with us. Right? So whenever we are going to launch an instance, the private key with the extension .pem will be along with us. And Now, since we are using Windows laptop or a Windows computer, now in case if I want to go ahead and log in into this virtual server, I first need to convert this .pem file to .ppk using a Partigen software. So there are two softwares which we require. First is Partigen and the second is Putty software. So using the Partigen software, we are basically trying to convert the file from one format to other. Right now, if I have to log in into the Linux machine that we have just launched, I require the IP address of that machine and then the username and then the key pair. So the first step is basically using the Partigen software. I had to basically convert the file. Once I get converted the file, I should be able to log in into the using the Putty terminal. Right. So with the help of the Putty terminal, we have to supply the IP address and then the key pair. And once it gets logged in, it is going to ask you for the username. So that was the basically first step that we have done in order to get logged into the EC2 instance. Now let's go ahead and learn about the properties of the instance, and then we are going to learn about what are the security groups in detail. So let's first get launched the machine. I'm in my AWS account and I'll just go down and navigate to the Asia Pacific Mumbai region. Okay, let's check out in the EC North Virginia if I have anything. Okay, I already have one of the key pair from the North Virginia region of this AWS account. We'll just verify the key pair. Okay, let's check out for the Asia Pacific Mumbai. Okay, so let's go down to the dashboard. Here, I'll just quickly go ahead and launch an EC2 instance. As just we're discussing about the steps, the first step is selecting the AMI, and the second step is basically selecting the family. So as a part of free tier, we are going to only get T2 micro as free, and in this, we are going to select the network as default VPC, and subnet specifically we do not have preference. If you remember, the Mumbai region has got two availability zones, so there will be two different subnets available here. One is AP South 1A, another is AP South 1B. And auto assign public IP, just ensure that this is an enable state so that you will get an IP address in order to log in inside this specific system. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add storage. So I'll go ahead and pick up the root device with the size of 8 GB, and the general purpose SSD is going to be the type of my volume. And then I'll just go ahead and add the tags. And then I'll add the security group. So currently I do have a security group with the name web server, which has already got HTTP, SSH and the HTTPS ports opened up. So this has got HTTP and SSH port opened up. So I'll just go and review and launch. And when I'm going to launch, I'll just select the key pair which I already have through. So I do have this December first key pair. So I'll just go ahead and use it across. So there we go. My instance is about to be launched. So first, looking out at the descriptional properties of the EC2 instance. So if you see, whenever the instance is being launched, I do get 4 different tabs here. First is about description, second is about the status checks, third is about the monitoring, and fourth is about the tags. Now, tags we all as know, when we were launching the instance, we were just trying to key in the name, right? So tags are basically helping us to organize the data as well as manage the AWS resources in a specific team, as well as they also help us with the determination of the specific costing happening on specific team. So we have learned about the tags. Next, let's come down to this description part and see what all is available here. So in the description specifically, it shows the instance ID. Instance ID is basically a unique number generated by Amazon itself in order to identify the instance. So this is the number that got generated, and by this we will be able to uniquely identify the EC2 instance across all the AWS accounts which are available with the people. Now, currently the my instance state is in running, and instant type is T2 micro, and availability zone. If you remember, we didn't give any specific availability zone in which it should get launched, but automatically it has picked up AP South 1A. We didn't have any specific preference, but still it has picked up AP South 1A. So depending upon the availability zones resources, whichever is free, automatically Amazon is going to pick up one of them. However, we do have an option. If you want to launch in specific availability zone, we can always select it across. So currently my instance is going to be a part of AP South 1A, and then we have the security group that we have attached to this, that is with the name web server SG. Now if I click on view inbound rules, this really gives me a very great interface. If you see, it says security groups associated with the instance. This is the instance ID. And then what are the ports? We have the port 80 and we have the port 22, which are being opened up for this EC2 instance. And currently it is open up for entire world, right? So if I give 0.0.0.0 bar 0, which means it is open to the entire world, anyone would be able to access this instance, provided they do have this key pair which we have associated with it, right? Since we are not using user ID and password method, and it is just a key pair, so the other user on the other end should have this key pair in order to log in into this. So this really gives a cool picture of how the security groups are associated, and currently the name of the security group is web server security group. And scheduled events, there are no specific scheduled events for the Mumbai region at this moment of time. You can just go ahead and click on this. It's going to just show you if there are any scheduled events all across. So exactly just below the dashboard, you can see if there are any events coming up. Next is AMI ID. Now if you see, it says Amazon AMI HVM 2017-19 and some number, and finally there is one unique number with which we will be able to identify it. That is AMI-D5C18EBA. Now this number is specifically unique for this Amazon Linux AMI in this specific Mumbai region. Now if you see, whenever we are launching an EC2 instance, there in the first step where we see the lot of images, each image has got a unique ID, and that is displayed at the end of the name, right? So this image ID is specifically unique for this region. Now if I go ahead and change the region, let's say I'll go to North Virginia. Okay, now if I go down to the North Virginia, in this, if I select in the quick start, if you see the AMI IDs, you see the Amazon Linux AMI, both of them are of the same version, that is of 2017-0901, but the AMI ID with which I'll be able to identify, both of them are different, right? It is D5C18EBA and this one is 55EF662F. The image is same, but since they are in a different region, both of them have a different unique ID in order to identify themselves. Let's click on cancel. One sec. Okay, so we just had a word from Rahul in order to know about the scheduled events. Now, if you remember, when we go to the dashboard, here we were in the first, we just checked out what is service health and the scheduled events, right? Service health is basically how this region is performing at this moment of time. Is there any problem with the region? So specifically it says no, this region is operating normally, and we are also able to see the status of each of the availability zone as well. Now AP South 1A and AP South 1B are two availability zones available in the Mumbai, and both of them are operating normally. Sometimes there could be some problem, or sometimes they may also have to go under maintenance period for certain devices in the specific availability zone. So in that case, if there is any maintenance activity that is going to come up, that is usually shown up in the scheduled events. So currently there are no scheduled events. Even if there are any scheduled events, you can just go down to a specific dashboard and you will be able to see from the this specific part if there are any, right? So you can also see it here, and it says events may include operational activities planned by AWS, such as instance reboots or retirements, right? So if there are any scheduled events, that will be shown up here, right? Whether it is ongoing or whether it's a scheduled for the future. So those things will be basically shown up in this scheduled events. So in case if that scheduled event is getting applied to my EC2 instance, then it will also basically show up here, because if it is a part of AP South 1A, and if on the AP South 1A availability zone, if they are going to take any maintenance activity, then it will be shown up here. Scrolling a little more, then it shows me the key pair associated with it. So December 1st key pair is something that we have associated with our EC2 instance, and then EBS optimized is false. We'll go learn about this in near future. And then the root device type. If you remember, we are now using the EBS volumes. So earlier there used to be some other volume which is called as instance store volumes. So specifically, we are going to learn about both the differences about EBS versus instance store volumes in the upcoming labs. So for now, just remember, we are no more using anything called as instance store volumes at all. It is just the EBS volumes, and it shows what is the root device for this EC2 instance. It is basically /dev/xvda, and there is only one block device attached to this EC2 instance, that is /dev/xvda. If I scroll up again and come to the right side, it is basically showing me the public DNS name. So each EC2 instance that we are going to launch, we are going to receive two IP addresses, that is public IP address and the private IP address. Private IP address are internal to the Amazon itself. So when we are going to create our own VPC, we will see how this private IP addresses actually help us to log in inside the EC2 instances. At the time, I might not require the public instance at all. Just with the help of private IP addresses inside my VPC, I'll be able to log in into the machines. So currently in our case, when we are exposing the EC2 instances as web servers, we will basically get public IP address as well as the private IP address. Now this is the public IP and this is the public host name, or we call it as public DNS name. And then we have the private host name and then the private IP address. And if I scroll a little more, it is basically showing me the VPC in which we have launched. If you remember, we launched in the default VPC. So this is the VPC ID of the default VPC. And since this is launched in AP South 1A, this has got one specific subnet, and this is the subnet ID of the VPC in which we have launched it. It is attached to default network interface, that is ETH0, and the source destination check currently is set to true. So we are going to learn about all of these things, and just scroll down a little more. And the owner. So basically this is my AWS account ID, that is owner. So I am the owner of this specific AWS account or specific EC2 instance as well. And the launch time, at what time it was launched, and the termination protection is basically false. So if you remember, when we launched the first EC2 instance, at the step number 3, when I go ahead and yeah, so here I get enable termination protection. So if I enable this flag, then it is basically going to show me this here, saying that termination protection is basically true, but currently we have not selected, so termination protection is false. Nevertheless, if you have not mentioned while launch, you can anyway change it across later. Just select the EC2 instance, come to the EC instance settings and click on change shutdown behavior, change termination protection, and you can just go ahead and enable this at any point in time. And now if you see, if I refresh the screen and check it out, you see the termination protection has become true. So we can change the termination protection at any point of time, even before the launch or after the launch of the instance. And then life cycle, basically it is normal monitoring. We get basic monitoring free. So we are going to learn about what are the basic monitoring features we are going to get free in the next part of the tab. And then virtualization, we are using HVM. HVM basically stands for hardware virtualization. And others will just leave it down, and tenancy we basically get it as default. Now if you go and launch instance, so if you see beneath every instance in very small letters, there is something written across, right? It says root device type and the virtualization type. So each EC2 instance has got something which is written beneath itself. So each instance is basically using the EBS root device volume. So it specifically displays saying that the root device volume is going to be of type EBS. As I said, there is other type which is known as instant store volumes, but we do not use it anymore since they are deprecated. So now we are using only EBS. And if you go down to choose an AMI, you specifically get an option where you will be able to see root device type is always EBS, and the virtualization type is HVM. So there are two different types of virtualization. That is, one is para virtualization and second is the HVM. So we have first one type as HVM, or second is basically type of PV. So HVM stands for hardware virtualization, PV stands for para virtualization. So HVM is much more better in terms of performance when compared to the para virtualization. Performance, speed, everything is much more better in terms of HVM. So in most of the cases, we do use HVM machines itself when compared to para virtualization. However, if you want to find out some machines with a para virtualization, just come down to the community AMIs, just scroll a little down and click on the instant store volumes. You see the root device type is going to change to the instant store here. And if I scroll this page a little down and just go Control F and PV, yeah, here it is showing, right? So there are some machines with the para virtualization as well, but in case you want to find them out, you will specifically have to go ahead and select the AMI from the community, and then just scroll down a little bit, and from the root device type just go and select the instant store volumes. So you'll be able to see the root device types of the instant store as well as virtualization type of para virtual. Next is about the status check. Now what happens in status check? So there are two different types of status checks that usually come up across. Now if you see from the overview here, it says the name, the instance ID, the type, availability zone, running state, and then here it says status checks 2/2 passed. So what are those status checks that are getting passed? So those are nothing but system status check and the instance status check. So each EC2 instance is going to have two status checks, and it has to pass both of them in order to be able to work properly. So if any one of them goes wrong, my instance will not be behaving well. So what are those status checks? One of them is system status check. Second is basically instance status check. Now when we talk about the system status check, so if you scroll on the I here, it is basically giving me information about what is this status check going to do. This check verifies that your instance is reachable. We test that we are able to get network packets to your instance. How they are checking? Let's see. If this check fails, there may be an issue with infrastructure hosting your instance, such as AWS power, networking, or software system. You may need to restart or replace the instance or wait for our systems to resolve the issue or seek a technical support. Now, if you see, when we talk about the system status check, so it is basically checking the check. It is basically checking on the side of the system if there is any problem. Basically, what could be the problem with the system? If the network is not connected, or if the power is not available efficiently, or if there is any problem with the setup in the data center. This is actually causing the system status check to fail, which means if there is a problem with a specific hardware side or a physical device side, then it is basically a system status check, right? So if you check out here, it does say if there is any problem with the power, networking, or any software system because of which we are unable to reach this EC2 instance, then that is system status check problem. Now other check we have is instance status check. What happens in the instance status check? Now this check verifies that your instance operating system is accepting traffic. If this check fails, you may need to reboot your instance or make modifications to your operating system configuration. So if it is related to anything on the software inside the machine, right? So already EC2 instance system status check is fine, which means power, networking, everything is well set up, and with the help of system status check we are able to reach it, but we are unable to reach to our EC2 instance because there is some problem in the operating system. Let's say my operating system got corrupted or something went wrong and I am unable to log in inside this. So it could be due to instance status check. So if this check fails, you may need to reboot your instance. So sometimes we may have to just reboot our instance or make modifications to our operating system so that we will be able to resolve this instance status check. So always check out that your EC2 instance has got both the checks passed. So even if one of the check is failed, the very first step you have to come down is to the status checks and find out which of the check has failed. So currently it is showing in green color. System reachability check is passed. Instance reachability check is also passed. So if any one of them fails, you will be able to check out the status here. So that was about the status check. And next is monitoring. Now for any EC2 instance that we are going to launch, by default, basic monitoring is available for each of the instance. And what are the parameters that we get in basic monitoring? So let's go ahead and check it out. So here, if you see, these are the parameters that I'm able to check out for my EC2 instance by default. As such, we have not enabled any detailed monitoring. So I'm just going to get a monitoring which is going to be a part of every 5 minutes, and that is called as a basic monitoring. In monitoring, we have two types. One is basic or detailed. Now, basic is something that is given for any EC2 instance, but the parameters will be updated every 5 minutes. So if I talk about the CPU utilization, so that parameter will be updated every 5 minutes only. If you go for the detailed one, you are going to get the parameters for every 1 minute. So that is the difference between the basic and the detailed monitoring. Now, in terms of this basic monitoring or detailed monitoring, what are the parameters that I usually get? So we get the parameters that is CDNS. You may have to remember this acronym, which will help you. Now, what does the C stands for? It is for CPU. D stands for disk. N stands for network. S stands for status checks. So we just learned about the status checks. There are two different types. If you remember, instance status check and the system status check. So if I scroll down, here it shows status check if there is any failure. So currently it is trying to show me if there is any status check that got failed. And specifically it is showing me status check failed if there is any. So it is going to basically count and let me show if there is any status check failure. Again, it is trying to check out for one other status check. So currently there aren't any. So my system is behaving very well. So that is a system status check fail. And in terms of network, so what do we get? The parameters in the network. I basically get the parameters like network in, network out, network packets in, and network packets out. So in the network in, basically it is showing how much amount of bytes of data is being transferred or what's happening around. So in terms of network in and network out, it's basically showing how many bytes of data is being in or how many bytes of data is out. And then in terms of packets, it's basically trying to help me in how many packets of data has been transferred or not, if there is any. And the next, if we talk about the disk, it is going to give me the parameters of the disk. So it is going to let me know how many disk reads are happening, how many disk read operations are happening, how many disk writes are happening, and how many disk write operations are happening. So in terms of disk, it is basically going to give me the number of reads and the read operations, number of writes and the number of write operations happening on the disk. And finally the CPU. So it is basically also going to give me insight of how much CPU is being utilized for my system. So that is specifically the CPU utilization is being given to me as a part of basic monitoring. So I can also check out the CPU credit usage or CPU credit balance. So every EC2 instance that we are going to launch basically has got certain CPU credit balances depending upon the family. So if it is a T2 micro, so since we get one virtual core of CPU, that gets certain credit balances. So it basically is showing how many are available and how much is being used across. And mostly we actually use the CPU utilization in order to create any alarms. So in future we are going to create few alarms for this EC2 instance on the basis of CPU utilization. So always remember these are the 4 parameters which are available as a part of monitoring. Now you guys might be wondering, one of the parameter which is most widely used is not available here. Which of them it is, right? If you remember from the computer, what are the components? I have CPU, I have hard disk, I get RAM and OS, security card, network card, right? These are the 6 important components of a computer. Now here we are able to get the monitoring for CPU, we are able to get the monitoring for the hard disk, we are able to get the monitoring for the network. Now the most important component is RAM. So the RAM is not actually available as a part of monitoring component here. So if you want to create monitoring for the RAM, then that is called as a custom metrics. So we have to create our own custom metrics in which you can add other components apart from this which is being given by Amazon. So specifically in most of the cases we actually create a custom metrics for the RAM because RAM is not actually available as a part of metrics whenever we are going to check out for basic monitoring or even in the detailed monitoring as well, we get only these 4 parameters, that is CPU, disk, network, and status check. So you may want to remember these with the help of the acronym CDNS, right? C stands for CPU, D is for disk, N is for the network, and S is for the status checks. So that was all about the introduction to the EC2 section. Any questions or queries here, Divya and Rahul? Okay, so the next part is about security groups. Now, as we all know, there is one security group which is actually attached to this EC2 instance. So what can we do with it? So the basically security group is allowing us to secure our EC2 instances, right? So who should have access, who shouldn't have access, all those things we are basically controlling it with the help of security groups. Now let's say first let's log in into this EC2 instance. I'll just open up the instance. I'll use my PuTTY terminal. I have to give my host name. I'll click on the SSH auth. I'll pass my key pair. I'll just change the appearance because if the font size is a little bigger, it will be better for the visualization. So I'll just keep it at 16 and then say OK and then say open. So the very first step, I'm going to log in into the instance for the very first time. It is going to ask me to verify the key fingerprint, whether the key pair what we have passed is correct or not. I'll say yes. And then if I go ahead and say EC2-user, so basically it is going to allow me to log in into the system. So this is our first Linux machine that we have launched in the AWS, and we have been specifically able to log in inside this. Now let's learn about few basic Linux commands that we are going to use it across in our day-to-day sessions. So the first thing is elevating the privileges, right? So if you want to elevate the privileges, if you see the name of the user with which you have logged in is EC2-user, and now let's say you want to install some software, like let's say you want to install Apache software, Apache Tomcat. Let's say yum install httpd -y, but it's not going to allow me to do this because I need to be a root user or I need to be an administrator. So how do I get into a root user? Specifically, I need to elevate my privileges. How do I do it? This is the command sudo su. So specifically, I'm just asking my privileges to be updated to the sudo, that is root user. If you remember, here it shows sudo is basically a place from where I'll be able to run the commands. So first I'll do is sudo su, which is going to help me elevate my privileges. Now if you see, I am at a root user. So let's just make a note of the first command. So the first command just we looked in is sudo su. So if I have to elevate my privilege to the root user, how do we do it? This is the command, that is sudo space su. Now, once we have elevated the privileges, the first thing is it itself says there are some packages for the security. So Linux is very well in terms of security because it manages its own security and it helps us to secure the system, right? So there are certain security packages which are actually available, which needs to be updated, right? So it clearly shows there is one package which needs to be updated. So if I want to update all the security patches for this system, how do we do it? It's very easy. I just need to go ahead and say yum update. I'll just say yum update and click enter. So if you see, the same command was already provided to me earlier. So if I just say yum update and enter, it is basically going to download all the important security patches. Specifically in this case, it is going to update this Amazon SSM agent, and currently there is one dependency for this specific patch to get updated. So it is asking, would you also like to download the dependency software? So I'll say yes and then say enter. So there we go. We have been successfully able to update the security patches. Now we were able to give one small dependency check here by saying y, but if you don't want to enter that, you may just give it as yum update space -y, and it's automatically going to take the dependency as y itself, right? So it doesn't have to wait for the manual intervention. Let's do it for the next one. Let's say I want to install some software. First I'll update it here. Now let's say I want to install some software. Let's say it's PHP, that is something I want to install, or if it is Apache. Apache is basically a web server which helps us to convert this Linux machine into a web server, right? So let's say if I want to install the Apache, or maybe if I want to install something like e-links software. So there are a lot of softwares like we have in our Windows system, Chrome browser, we install VLC players and other things. Similarly, we can also install some things in this Linux machine as well. Let's say I want to install Apache, right? Apache is basically a web server, or we also call it as with the name HTTPD. So since we are using a Linux machine here, I'll have to use this HTTPD here. So I'll just say yum, and then you have to write install. Once you write the install, specifically you have to write the name of the software which you want to install. Let's say if it is HTTPD, I'll put it here and then just say -y so that it doesn't wait for my manual intervention. I'll just say yes. Now if you see, it has successfully installed the HTTPD software, and there were some dependencies like APR util, and the HTTPD tools. All of them got automatically installed because it didn't wait for my manual intervention to confirm, as I have given -y at the last, right? So to install softwares, so we have to give the software name and then the -y. Let's say now I want to install PHP. So how it is, it's very simple. I'll just say yum install php -y. There we go. It has automatically installed the PHP as well, right? So I just need to give the command as yum and then the install and then the name of the software and then the -y. It is basically going to go ahead and install them. So we learned a couple of commands. Now let's say I want to find out whether the PHP is already installed or not, or some software is installed or not. How do we find it out? So simply just go ahead and type if you just type which PHP, it will give you the path where it is already installed. If it is not there, it is going to give something else. Like let's say I don't have MySQL in this, I'll just say which MySQL. So it says no MySQL, right? So it is not available basically. So if I say which HTTPD, we have installed it some time back, so it says it is available here. You can use either the which command or there's command with this also, I guess. Where is HTTPD? Yeah, so you can also use the command where is or which are going to help you to let you know if the specific software is already installed in the Linux machine or not. So you can also say where is PHP, and it's going to show me like this. So if I just say where is MySQL, it doesn't give me any answer. Right? It just says MySQL, so which means it is not available anywhere. So let's go and update this. So you can use any one of them, either the which or where is. Now let's say if I want to find out the files, I'll just go ahead and clear the screen. So just type clear and it's going to clear the screen. Now let's say you want to find out inside which directory you are. You just need to say pwd. Pwd stands for present working directory. So pwd stands for present working directory. So currently I am inside this /home/ec2-user. So if I have to go one level back, I just need to say cd. Cd basically stands for change directory. So I'll just say dot dot. So if you see, now I am in the home. So currently I was in ec2-user and I am now moved one level back. That is because of with the help of cd dot dot. So cd basically stands for changing the directory. cd. Right now, let's say if I want to go again back to ec2-user, I have to type cd ec2-user. Now again I am back into ec2-user, and if I say pwd, it will show it as /home/ec2-user. Again, let's go back one level and then say pwd. It's going to show you the /home itself. Now if you want to find out what all directories are available in this specific home level, you can just say ls. ls is basically going to list all the files or directories. ls. So if I just move one more step back here and then just say ls, you will be able to see there are a lot of directories available in here, like bin, c group, etc, lib, local, media, opt. So these are all basically directories. So how can I say these are directories or not? So if you see, all of them are trying to appear in the blue colored or violet color, we can say. So these are basically directories. Now let me go inside this etc and show you. So you see there are a lot of files with all the different colors. So some of them are white in color, some of them are violet in color, some of them are in separate colors. And so one which we see in the format of white color are basically the files, right? So if I want to get inside this file, let's say cron tab, I can directly use some editors. Like in the Windows, we have Notepad, we have some editors inside this Linux machine as well. That is the nano editor we basically use, or you can also use Vim editors. Vim. So nano or Vim are the two different types of editors. Like we have Notepad, we have Vim or nano as editors in the Linux box. So currently I'm going to use the nano, and then I'm going to open up this file with the name cron tab. So there you go. It is going to show me the content inside this file. So if I want to get out from this file, how do we do it? Specifically, if you see at last, you can see the symbol with the X and then the cap. Cap symbol is nothing but you have to hit Control and then X. So on your keyboard, there is a Control key and then the X, capital X. So you can just go ahead and say Control plus X and you will automatically be coming out of that file. So if it is in direct violet color, it is clear that it is a directory. So if I say nano dhcp, it is not there. Basically, it is going to create one if I do like this. So if I want to go inside this dhcp, I'll have to just say cd dhcp, and now I am inside the dhcp. I'll just say ls, so it is going to let me know what are the files available inside this, right? That is dhclient.conf, hclient.d. So there are two different files available inside this. So one of them is again a directory and one of them is a file, right? So this is a file and this is a directory. So I can open up this file using the nano command, and if I want to go inside, I'll have to basically use cd and then name of this one, right? So again, it has got two files that are sh.sh, which means inside this I can actually write the shell scripting. So the files that end with .sh basically contain the shell scripting part. So let's come back all the way. So I'll clear the screen. So we learned some basic commands. What are they? How to elevate our privileges, that is using sudo su. And if in case if I want to update security patches, I basically have to give yum update -y. And if I have to install some software, I have to give yum install the name of software and then -y. And then to find out whether the software is already installed or not, we basically use which or where is. And to find out in which directory we are, I just say pwd in order to find out the path. And in order to change the directory, I do cd, that is change directory. And in order to list the files or directories, we basically say ls. Now there could be one question, why we use yum here, right? Why not something else? So depends upon the Linux system whether we use yum or something else. Now in Linux also we have a lot of flavors. So Linux machine specifically has got a lot of flavors. Now the flavors of Linux are basically a lot of them, but most widely used in the corporates are RPM based or Debian based. Now what kind of systems come under the RPM based? So specifically something like CentOS, or if it is Amazon Linux that we are currently using, or if it is RHEL, that is Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or if it is SUSE Linux, they all come under the RPM based machines. Now what comes under Debian based? So in the Debian based, we basically get Ubuntu. I'm not sure of the other flavors. Yeah, Ubuntu is a Debian based flavor. So what happens in this case? Now if I have to install, let's say PHP software, so if it is a RPM based machine, I'll use yum as the installer. So this is the installer in the RPM based machines. So yum is a software which is basically used as an installer in the RPM based. So RPM based machines, I'll use yum install and the name of the software. So specifically if I have to put in RPM based, I'll say yum install php and then say -y. But if I'm trying to use a Debian based machine like Ubuntu, if I have to install PHP, then I have to basically write apt-get. So only the installer changes, rest of the things remain same. Install php and then say -y, right? So this is the command basically I have to issue in the Debian based machines. So apt-get is the installer that we use in the Debian based machines. Yum is the installer that we basically use in the RPM based machines. So that was all about the introduction of Linux and some important commands that we are basically going to use across. So any questions or queries here? Rahul, Divya, any questions? How about you, Divya? Are you able to follow? Okay. Yeah, in case if you have any queries or doubts, you can just mail me back on the email ID. This is the email ID. Just put it across in case if you have any queries or doubts. I'll be glad to reply back to you on from my email ID. Okay, so that was all about the basics of Linux. Now let's go ahead and do some things inside this. Now we are going to learn few more Linux as well. Specifically, there are a lot of there are a lot of groups which are available for the technical discussion. I have not created them, but I am part of those. But maybe I'll be able to add them in case if you are interested to put through. Yeah, there are actually a lot of groups actually available. Sure. So you guys can just drop in an email to me and I'll just put it across on that. Okay. Now that we have just learned some of the basics in this, what all we have implemented, we have learned how to elevate the privileges. We learned how to install specific software. And then we learned how to change the directories and the path. Now let's say I have already installed this software with the name Apache, right, which is going to be called as HTTPD in our case. So if I want to convert my Linux machine currently, which is there, into a web server, right? So specifically we have installed HTTPD, but I need to start some services, right? If you remember, whenever some softwares are actually installed, so each software has got some services which will be running. Like let's say if I install Microsoft Office, that Office service has to be running, keep running in the background, so that I'll be able to open up the files like Excel sheet or Word at much faster rate, right? So if you go to this specific case in the Windows file system where you will be able to see services, so you see there are some manual services, there are some automatic services as well, right? Some services we are actually triggering them manually, some of them we are trying to automatically trigger, like WLAN. So whenever my system is switched on, automatically the Wi-Fi is switched on, right? I'm not doing it manually, so I have kept it as automatic. So automatically the Wi-Fi will be switched on whenever the system is switched on. Similarly, there are a lot of different software services which are available. As I just gave you example of Microsoft Office, maybe it should be available somewhere here. Yeah, so Office. Yeah, I guess this is the one which is the diagnostic part, diagnostic services. So currently it is at the manual level. So if it is already running behind the scene, then it makes me much more easier for open up this file. So if I click on this, it may take a fraction of seconds, right? So it just took few seconds, but yes, there was a small delay, I can say. But if we have the service running behind the scene, then you see the files open up much faster than that. Similarly, now we have actually installed the Apache software, but I have to switch on the Apache service in order to convert this server into a web server. So let's go ahead and start the service. So the command is very simple. I just need to write the service. And what is the service? That is HTTPD that is being installed, and then I need to go ahead and start it. So service HTTPD start. It is basically starting the Apache service. If I have to stop it, it's very simple. Service HTTPD stop, basically will stop the Apache service. Now let's again go back and start it. So these are all the commands you can basically look for: start, stop, restart, con restart, try restart, force reload, reload, right? So these are all some things that you can actually put across after HTTPD. So we are basically starting the service. Now that we have started the Apache service, Let me show you the thing, what happens. This is the public IP address. I'll just copy it and put it across in here and open this. You see, I am able to access my server from the browser because we have opened up the port number 80. If you remember, the web server has got a port number 80 which is opened up, and because of which I'm able to access it from the browser. Now if I go back to the security group and remove that rule of port 80, let's see what happens. Here is my web server security group. I'll go to the inbound, I'll click on edit, I'll remove this HTTP and then just save this. And now if I go back and refresh this, it may not respond. I'm going to put up across in the chat box the URL. You guys may want to try it if it is working for you guys or not, and let me know. Is it working, Rahul and Divya? Right. So let's go back to security groups and again make the changes. I'll add the rule HTTP. And then save it. And now can you guys try it out? Right. So any changes we make to the security group, remember the changes are going to take place effect immediately. So if I remove the HTTP security group rule, it doesn't allow me to access. If I again keep it back, it allows me to access. So remember, any changes that we are going to make to security group, the changes are going to take place effect immediately. And now we were also able to convert our web server into a web server. So our Linux server is now basically a web server which is installed with the Apache HTTP server. Now let's say I want to go ahead and change this home page. I want to have something which is really helpful for the people, right? So let's say I want to showcase something like Flipkart, which is going to display all the items. So here it says you may now add the content to the directory with the name var www/html. So you can customize the home page by going to this specific page, right? So let's go ahead and customize it. And currently it is delivering this welcome home page from this specific page, right? So in the configuration files, it is being displayed saying that whenever the user is hitting this IP address, they should be shown the welcome page of the Apache. Now let's go ahead and configure the home page. So I'll go to the specific path that is being said to me. CD is the command that I'm going to use to change directory. I'll say /var/www/html. So there I go, I'm in HTML. So if you're not sure if you're in correct path or not, just say pwd. There we go, it is going to show me where I am. And inside this, I'm going to use a nano editor. First, let's check out what are the files available. So currently I do not have. If I say ls, I'm not able to see any files or directories listed here. So we are going to create one file with the name index.html. And then this will be HTML. This is my home page from the So this is very basic HTML that I have just written here. So HTML basically works with the help of the tags. So I'm using the HTML tag here. This is the opening tag, this is the closing tag, and then I have the H1, that is header, and I'm closing the header tag here. So I'm just putting one small line here, that is, this is the first home page from the AWS cloud, and I'm going to save this as a index.html. Now, as I showed you, if I want to come out of this, I have to first click Control X. Then it's going to ask you, would you like to save the file? I'll say yes. So just type letter Y on your keyboard, and then it's going to ask you the name of the file is going to be index.html. I'll say yes, then click the enter key. So how did I save the file? Just let me put down the steps here. So first is, once you have written the content inside the file, just first type Control plus X and then the letter Y and then the enter key. Right? So this will actually help us to save the file. Now, if I don't want to go inside the file, let's say I want to view what is the content inside this index.html file. How can we check it out? So the command is simple. Just write cat and then just index.html. So it is basically going to display you the content what is available inside this index.html file. So you don't have to go inside the file to check out what is the content. Just you can say it from here itself, say cat and then the name of the file. It is basically going to display you the content here. So I'll just write it here. So this is basically going to display the content. Now that we have configured it back, can you guys go ahead and check it out? What does the home page, just refresh the page and see what does it show across. So it is showing you the home page that we just reconfigured. Right, so this is the way we can actually configure our home pages. So if you want to now host a web server on the AWS, you guys are much more ready. We just learned the basics of Linux command, what are important, what are the important security ports to be opened up, and how to configure it. So we are going to learn in much more detail about all these things. Of course, we are not going to give IP address to the users. It doesn't sound well, right? So we are going to learn in detail how we can actually host it to a specific domain name. So let's say if I want to host it as a flipkart.com or some user-friendly domain name, how can we do it? So we are going to learn in much more detail how we can do all these things end to end. This was just a beginning. So we just learned one part of the security group, that is any rules that are being applied to the security groups, the changes take place effect immediately. Right, so we are going to learn in much more detail about the security group in the tomorrow's session. So in today's session we were able to cover up the basics of the Linux and the descriptional properties of my EC2 instance. What are the different types of status checks, what are the different types of metrics which are available for the monitoring. So all those things was something that we were able to look through. Any questions or queries before we close for the day, Rahul and Divya, from your side? I'm not sure if we can log in directly as a root. Let me check out. I've not done it ever. Basically, we log in as a normal user, that is EC2-user, and then we will be able to elevate our privileges. Directly, they are not going to give me the root user password. So you can configure the users who are going to be a part of administrators as well. Let me check it out. Yeah, it will not allow you to log in as a root at all. So first you have to authenticate using EC2-user, and then only you'll be able to elevate the privileges. So once you are already inside this specific server, you may have to configure the users and the groups, other groups, where you will be able to create the multiple users, and then you will be able to give them a specific level of access. Sure. So thanks all for the day, and we will meet back tomorrow again at the same time in the morning to explore the next part of our EC2 section. Bye all.